The three biggest real-world EVs of 2020 are the Tesla Model 3, the Tesla Model Y, and the Ford Mach-E.
Ford Mustang Mach-E. It's a real muscle car, Alistair.
That's right. As you can see, I'm currently sat in Edmunds' long-term Model 3.
And I'm sitting across in the Tesla Model Y. We're social distancing right now appropriately. Now, Edmunds has owned essentially every Tesla model ever produced with the exception of the Roadster. But beyond that, Alistair actually owns a Model 3 himself and has been inside the Ford Mustang Mach-E.
That's right. Last November, I flew up in the middle of a snowstorm to Detroit to check out the Mach-E and had the car to myself in a studio for a day. So we feel we're uniquely positioned to compare these three vehicles.
We're going to go over a lot of the broad aspects of these vehicles, but for more details, make sure to click the link below to visit Edmunds.com to see the full story.
Of the three cars, it's the Model 3 that arguably needs the least introduction. It really has become the Ford Model T of the EV world. Tesla sold over 150,000 of these in the US alone last year, making it one of the top 10 selling cars in America. It's priced from a little under $40,000 to just over $60,000, and Tesla claims an electric range of anywhere from 250 to 322 miles, depending on which you buy. Although, to be honest, in Edmunds' experience, you're lucky to achieve around 85% of that. The one that I'm sitting in is actually a $35,000 off-menu special that we managed to buy. It's well worth checking out Carlos's video on how we bought it.
The Tesla Model Y takes a formula that's basically served every major automaker out there. Take your popular compact sedan and transform it into an SUV or crossover. Now, the Model Y shares most of its underpinnings with the Tesla Model 3, which is a good thing because we awarded that our top-rated best electric car for 2020. The Model Y is currently available in just two trim levels. More will be coming in the future. What's available currently is the long range and performance. Prices start at about $55,000 and go up to a little over 60 grand. Range is 315 miles or about that, and that's claimed. Although this performance trim with the performance upgrade, yeah, you get performance twice, does about 280 miles of claimed range. Like most compact luxury SUVs, the Model Y is currently available as a 5-seater, though Tesla has shown a 3-row 7-seat option that will be available in the future.
Carlos, you say shown. I was actually the launch of the Model Y at SpaceX quite close to here and managed to snap a picture of the third row. They are suitable for children and probably very small children at that, so to call it a 3-row is a bit of an exaggeration.
It's technically there, right?
It's technically there, but also you're going to lose a load of trunk space.
True. But unlike the Model Y, but like most compact SUVs, the Mach-E won't be available with a third row, right?
That's right. Ford's made the decision from the outset it will be a strict 5-seater. For me, what's interesting about the Mach-E is just the extent to which Ford's playing catch-up. Tesla currently accounts for 78% of the EV market in the US, and the mighty Ford is absolutely nowhere. 2 years ago, they had no intention of building a proper EV. They were just going to stick a motor in a traditional sedan or SUV and call it an electric car. But their new management came in, a crack team called Team Edison was set up, and the result in record time is the Mach-E, or the Mustang Mach-E as we should call it. Now, we think Ford's opted to use the Mustang name for two reasons. One, they wanted to suggest that it was sporty and interesting, but they also had to justify a pretty hefty price tag. The Mach-E will cost dollar for dollar almost exactly the same as the Model Y, at least when the entry-level versions of the Model Y go on sale later this year. So $44,000 to just over $60,000, and the range is pretty much identical too, 210 miles to 300. It's worth considering that the equivalently sized gas-powered Ford model, the Escape, starts at just $25,000, and even the huge Explorer starts at $33,000. The Mach-E, it ain't cheap.
Well, let's get straight to the Mach-E and how it compares against the Model Y. We're both sitting in very similar Tesla interiors. What are the biggest differences and similarities between the two?
Well, I think the most astonishing thing for me, they all cliche about imitation being the highest form of flattery. If you look at the tech spec, if you look at the aesthetics outside and in, the Mach-E is almost a replica of the Model Y. Yes, the Mach-E has more jewelry, if you like, to make it look more like a Mustang, and arguably I think it's probably a little bit better looking, but the basic silhouettes are nigh on identical, and particularly the way they both have that kind of exaggerated athletic rear shoulder line. Inside too, Ford has ditched its traditional architecture for something that looks a lot more like a Tesla. You've got a 15.5-inch touchscreen, which instead of being horizontal is vertically mounted. They've even got a soundbar, this time made by Bang & Olufsen, across the top of the dashboard, just like Tesla has. It's extraordinary how similar they are. The one thing I would say though, the Ford has got a speedo exactly where you want it in front of the steering wheel, rather than having to read the speed from the center of the car like you do in a Tesla, but incredibly similar.
I appreciate the speedometer in front of the steering wheel, and I also appreciate the physical controls on the screen too. Let's talk about some other interior touches. Tesla products are fairly famous for having Spartan minimalist interiors. How did the Mustangs feel? The Mustang Mach-E's, how did it feel inside?
They have brought a few more kind of Ford bits back into it. You've got sensible column stalks, you've got sensible buttons on the steering wheel. There's actually a physical knob for the volume, for example. So what they've tried to do is take Tesla and then kind of evolve it a little bit and make it a little bit more ergonomic and a little bit more user-friendly.
And you've still got some of the Mustang hallmarks like ground speed on the speedometer, right?
You're right, actually. I have a confession. When I made the original video of the Mach-E, when it said ground speed, I was actually thinking that was to do with Mach being an aeronautical term. Then you quite rightly pointed out that I'd missed the fact that older Mustangs also had ground speed on their speedo. So there are some nice little bits of humor, and you could tell that the Ford team has really thought about this vehicle. I love the fact that the front, for example, has a little valve that allows you to drain it out. So if you want to use it for tailgating and use it as an ice tray or something, you can do. So there's a bit of humor and a real sort of attention to detail that runs throughout the car.
And while we're on the topic of storage, you mentioned the frunk. We don't know the exact interior storage specifications of the Model Y because Tesla hasn't published them, at least broken down by row. But given the exterior dimensions, it's hard to imagine them being very different, right?
It is. The Ford has a slightly longer wheelbase, so you would probably expect it to have a little bit more rear legroom. I wasn't able to measure the Mach-E, but on paper, Ford's actually claiming slightly less, which is a little bit confusing. And Ford's trunk also looks a little bit smaller, but to be honest, we're kind of playing at the margins. Both of these are sensible, practical family cars.
The experience of them of buying them and owning them will probably be different, right? Because the Ford, you're still gonna have to go through a traditional dealership.
You are. I mean, Ford's got around 2,100 dealers across the US, and the Mach-E will be sold in a fairly conventional way. However, Ford says that a lot of things that people like about Tesla ownership, the fact that you can complete the whole thing online and actually cut down the time you have to spend at the dealer, they're trying to introduce some of that with the Mach-E experience. And it'll be interesting to see how people respond to the idea of buying a fixed price Ford.
Another difference between the two is how they've done trim levels. Like both vehicles will be rear wheel drive or all wheel drive. Both will have short range battery packs and long range battery packs. Both come in high performance, but the Ford has a lot of trim levels, at least on paper.
It reminds me a little bit of how we used to talk about Apple and Microsoft, that Ford just can't help layering on complexity. So you have a really big model range that starts with the base car, then you go through the GT, which is the fast one, the twin motor, and then you also have something called a California Route 1 for reasons that nobody seems to be able to explain, which is long range battery but single motor and rear wheel drive, and that's all about maximizing range. So yeah, it takes a little bit of getting your head around, and you have to kind of fight your way through the website a little bit.
I guess the flip side is if you're so inclined, you can choose the Mach-E that's right for you. You have more range and personalization if you're willing to go through and do your homework, right?
You do, and that's the flip side of Tesla ownership, that certainly in the Model 3's case, there's only a handful, and the Model Y, there's only a handful of colours to choose from, a couple of different wheel options, and that's about it. The opportunity to personalise your car will be much greater with the Mach-E than it is with the Teslas.
Well, let's get back to the screen though. What was your perception of what it looked like?
This is going to be a big issue, because the screen that I saw was sort of relatively early in its development, and it's clear they tried to take a lot of what Tesla does well, but then give it a bit of Fordness, if you like, and there'll also be better integration for Apple and Android devices that you simply don't get with Tesla. But we still have some reservations. Ford traditionally has not done software well, and even if you look at the new Explorer, they made a big noise about this kind of vertical iPad style screen, but to be honest, the functionality is a bit rubbish. So it is a question mark over the Mach-E how well the screen works. But then, to be honest, Carlos, the Tesla system, everybody thought it was really kind of revolutionary when it first came out, but now it's starting to feel a bit dated. They've layered on more and more functionality, and it's not that easy to use.
Yeah, and it's not that smooth either. I really miss being able to use Apple CarPlay or Android Auto in this setup. Let's circle back to the buying experience and talk about leasing and everybody's favorite topic, tax rebates. How does that relate to the Mach-E?
Everybody's favorite topic. It's interesting because Tesla at the moment doesn't offer a lease deal on the Model Y, but it does on the 3, and they will come on the Y. And Tesla's lease deals actually are pretty good and pretty conventional. Ford at the moment is not offering a traditional lease on the Mach-E. They're offering something called Ford Options, and that actually complicates the tax rebate system in that you can't bake it into the lease, you have to claim it yourself. Check out our written piece for more on that, because it's quite complicated. The one thing though that the Mach-E will have in its favour, at least in the first year, is you will be able to apply for the $7,500 federal tax credit simply because Ford hasn't made 200,000 EVs, whereas Tesla has. But bear with me, Ford has only got 50,000 vehicles to go, so in theory, after year one, all the pricing will be the same and the federal tax credit will have gone.
So if you want it now, get in early.
If you want to save $7,500 worth of tax on the Mach-E, then you have to buy an early one, certainly before the end of 2021. Edmunds' advice generally is to lease an electric vehicle because the technology is moving on very quickly and the depreciation of some older electric cars can be a bit alarming. I, for example, leased my Model 3 and got a pretty competitive rate.
Not to mention Tesla's always getting better at actually making the cars too. So the best Tesla you can get is always the next one.
That's right. I mean, Edmunds bought a very early Model 3 back at the beginning of 2018. I think it finally arrived and the build quality was patchy to say the least. But I don't know what you think, Alice, but this latest Model Y and the Model 3 that I'm sitting on, which is only 6 months old, they feel a lot better.
Very true. And we should call out the Mach-E. It's not out yet. Chances are it might not be this year given the current pandemic. We'll know more as things go on. We can only say as much as we can during the time this video is recording. We'll have to wait till we get a full review of that, but we are eager to test it and evaluate it, of course.
We are, and we're expecting to do that. I spoke to Ford this morning just to find out where it all was, and everything's in shutdown. So they're still hoping to get cars by the end of this year, but don't be too surprised if it slides into 2021 before you can actually kind of get behind the wheel.
So the buying experience will be somewhat different, but the charging experience remains a question mark. We haven't driven it, we haven't tested the Mach-E. How do you think it's going to stack up against what Tesla offers?
Well, this is really Tesla's trump card because they have over 12,000 Tesla superchargers across the US, and you can still use any other charging point on top of that. And generally, the system works really well. Ford will be reliant on the Electrify America setup, which at the moment you'd have to say is lagging a little bit behind. So definitely advantage Tesla on charging. Having said that, if these cars have got a range of 200 plus miles, then most people will charge them at home and rarely have to visit the supercharger network unless you're trying to take the car on a long journey. So if you live with one of these things, it's actually less of a big deal than you might think.
Agreed. And Alistair, you haven't driven it, but the Mach-E is called the Mustang and it's still a made in America and therefore it's a muscle car, of course. What do we think about the driving experience? How might it look?
Well, on paper at least, it's really similar to the Teslas. The basic configuration is the same, a kind of skateboard chassis with the batteries underneath the interior, then either one motor at the rear driving the rear wheels, or one motor at the back, one motor at the front driving all the wheels. And on paper at least, it's got plenty of firepower. Even the entry-level car is 255 horsepower, but if you go for the GT, it has 459 horsepower, and wait for this, 612 pounds-feet of torque. So Ford's claiming 0 to 60 in around 3.5 seconds, which feels believable. So at least a 60, Carlos, it should be as fast as our GT500.
And versus Tesla claims it should be as fast as this Model Y Performance, but we'll find out when we can test it when our test track reopens.
One interesting thing the Ford has got on the GT, Magna Ride suspension, like the new Corvette and like the GT500. So we've got good experience of that, and it will be interesting to see whether the Mustang lives up to its name and outhandles the Tesla. The other thing else I'm looking forward to is Ford is promised that they're engineering in different engine noises into the Mach-E. So we should have a bit of oral entertainment as we drive along.
That wraps up what we can talk about with the Mach-E and the Model Y, but because we're now sitting in two very similarly priced Teslas, you're in the Model 3, I'm in the Model Y, we should talk about the similarities and differences between these two. What do you think someone should know, and what do you think someone should consider when trying to decide between these two cars?
Well, the interesting thing is when you strip away the bodywork, they're fundamentally the same thing. It's basically the same skateboard chassis, but Tesla's kind of got the Model 3 body, it's stuck a magnet on top and kind of stretched the whole thing to create the Model Y. For me, as a family man, the Model Y is just that little bit more practical. You've got more rear leg room, you sit a little bit more upright, which gives you the greater impression of space, and the trunk's more versatile. It's a little bit bigger, but also it allows you to fold the seats back. So if you want a kind of practical, everyday family car, then arguably the Y is probably worth an extra, $4,000. Having said that, my wife recently bought a Model 3, and it works really well. We've only got one kid, but it works really well as a family car, and it's actually nice having a sedan where you can lock everything in the trunk and it's secure and out of the way.
Yeah, and the interesting thing too is the Model Y is actually pretty similar in terms of dimensions, except for the second row. The second row has so much more space on paper than the Model 3, and then you get those reclining rear seats, which make it even more comfortable to be inside of, right?
Yeah, I think that's right. And actually, like you, spent a lot of time in the Model Y and the Model 3, and a lot of it's a perception thing because it's more of an SUV position, so you sit a little bit more upright and your knees are a little bit more bent, and that actually creates more of a sense of space and gives you a little bit more knee room than you would in a kind of sedan where you have more of a kind of laid back driving position. So it is a reality, there's more room, but there's also a bigger perception of space in the Y.
Yeah, and so the Y is also interesting too because the front seats are identical. They're just positioned higher. They're just on these little stilts, and that makes sense because it gives you an easier access into the car. You don't have to duck down, you have to move your head down. It's more comfortable to get in, and you get that better forward visibility. I don't know about you, but I'm pretty disappointed with the rearward visibility on the Model Y. Model 3 isn't particularly good either, but this is even worse somehow.
Yeah, I think it's all to do with the styling. You've got kind of a little slot of a rear window, and I'm not a big fan of those camera style rear view mirrors, but if ever there's a car that might benefit from it, then it's the Model Y.
Well, would you trust it to work?
Oh, wait for the comments below.
I should call out too the difference in trim levels between the Model 3 and the Model Y, because we have like the full end of the spectrum of availability between these two. That Model 3 is an off-menu standard range car with limited range in terms of distance and less power and so on. This is a top-of-the-line performance trim with the performance upgrade. What do you think is the right option between the two extremes?
I know I'm going to hate myself for saying this as somebody who loves fast cars, but the performance thing is almost like a party piece. It's so fast that you use it to show off to your mates or you use it to kind of amuse yourself. But in everyday driving, you don't really need it. I mean, the reality is even the entry-level Model 3 is pretty quick as a road car. So I don't feel like it's worth an extra $20,000+ over the standard vehicle. The other thing, particularly if you've got a family, that performance model on performance suspension and 22-inch rims.
21s.
The right 21s. Apologise. 21-inch rims. The ride quality suffers, and
it's
pretty noticeable. Around town. It's pretty noticeable. Teslas don't have the best ride quality generally, but it's particularly bad in the Y.
Yeah, and that comment about ride quality is pretty uniform across Tesla. They generally are a bit firmer and have noisier ride quality versus all the comparable vehicles in the segments. But you really notice the weight of these wheels, the mass of these wheels, just making constant impacts. They're not harsh, but they are always moving in a way that you can sense in the cabin. And that's probably the biggest complaint I have about the performance Model Y, and I wish I could get this style vehicle with a smaller diameter wheel, because I still like that acceleration, even though it might be a little one note. I still want that experience. The other things to highlight, like the key differences between these two, is I have wireless charging here, but I wouldn't be surprised if that showed up in the Model 3.
Yeah, the reality is I bought a Model 3. I went on Amazon, $40, bought a third-party version, works just as well. And little things like you now get USB-C in the back where you've got traditional USB in the 3, but it's really, really small stuff. And ambient lighting, that's the one thing that the 3 really lacks these days. I loves me a bit of ambient lighting.
Ambient lighting and the black trim around the windows and on the door handles. I would really like to see a Model 3 with that black trim because I think it looks really good.
Now we're getting proper geeky.
So let's back up from the geekiness. I think it's appropriate to say that the Model Y is great for the needs of a family, but just maybe avoid the performance version unless you have you can tolerate a rough ride, right?
Yeah, I suspect that by the time we get into next year and the entry-level models have come out on the Y, so the standard range plus equivalent, it's probably going to be about, what, $4,000 more than the equivalent 3. And if you can get it on a good lease deal, which means it's probably maybe only going to be like $30 a month more, I think then the Model Y standard range plus will be the Tesla's biggest selling model. I think that's a given. It's probably going to be worth that little bit extra for that extra versatility and more space if you're buying it as a family car.
Versus the Y and the 3, which one do you recommend right now?
If you're in the market right now, I don't think you can beat a Tesla Model 3 Standard Range Plus, which was Edmunds' top-rated EV for 2020. But in a year's time, things are going to get a lot more interesting. You'll have the entry-level versions of Model Y and the Mach-E, and you have to expect the extra versatility of the SUV setup to be worth a few extra dollars. So that's going to be a fascinating test, and can't wait to drive the Mach-E, can't wait to drive the entry-level version of the Model Y. You and I will have to put our names down for that one, Carlos.
Totally agreed. Thank you guys for watching this video. Be sure to visit edmunds.com for more information, and hit like and subscribe to see more videos like this one.
And for more detail on all of this, be sure to hit the link directly below us on the YouTube channel.